Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Channels Book Club. Congratulations to all Nigerians on what some have described as the best elections in Nigeria's democratic history. Now, in a season of intriguing politics, we want to explore two books on nation building today. I'll be back after this break. Kuan Yew was Singapore's legendary leader and reformer. His recent death has sparked conversations about his legacy, impact, leadership style, and political ideas. His classic book remains a must-read for leaders all over the world. We invited Martin Udoji, a popular radio host, publisher, and author of one of our top 13 books for 2014, How to Read More, to discuss Kuan Yew's great book and potential lessons for a developing country like Nigeria. Enjoy the segment. Martins, thank you for joining us on the Channels Book Club. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Colin.
And congratulations on the elections. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of superlatives have been used to describe the election. You know, economists called it a watershed. I think it was truly monumental. But I think that we have to, as they say, see the forest from the trees. Even though the elections were brilliant, okay? But I think the icing on the cake for me was the concession that the president gave, because that was a game changer. It has never happened. And, you know, Kunle, I'm worried, you know, the place the president is going to have in history, because what he did has never been done, okay, in the history of this country, but not just in this country. But let's look at the country for a minute. You know, the presidency in this country is extremely powerful. So people don't give it away voluntarily. We had somebody who was in power for 8 years, and it took a massive public revolt for him to step aside. We had somebody who did 2 terms, and the country was put through a lot of stress as a third term plot, you know, was making the rounds. And at one time, we even had the president that was virtually dead. But, you know, people were still pulling the string. So for him to voluntarily concede, you know, I mean, is amazing. And if you look across Africa, we have people who are like seat-tight president. Jose Eduardo dos Santos of Angola has been in office since 1979, over 35 years. Robert Mugabe, 34 years. Yoweri Museveni in Uganda has been in office since 1987. So this man, you know, deserves our commendation. I think, you know, for me, he's my hero. I'm
sure for quite a number of people out there too. It's a historic time for Nigeria, and this sets the context for Kuan Yew's book, From Third World to First World, which we are reviewing. But before then, I mean, Kuan Yew just died recently after ruling for about 31 years or so. And I mean, he gave us this fantastic book, read all over the world by political leaders, north, south, east, and west. What do you think about the book and Kuan Yew himself?
I've read the book twice. I think it's a blueprint for, you know, governance. First, let's look at Singapore, you know, because to know what this man achieved, you have to put it in the context of where he was coming from. When he broke away from Malaysia, Singapore is tiny. In fact, in the book, it says that they inherited an island without a hinterland, you know, or a heart without a body. Singapore is about 640 square kilometers, 640. In comparison, Lagos is over 3,000 square kilometers, and Nigeria is close to 1 million square kilometers. That's how tiny it is. It was a hopeless piece of territory, as people said. But this is a country that was able to create the world's best airline, okay? And Singapore has the 3rd largest refining center in the world, after Texas and Rotterdam. And you know, is the cleanest city you will ever find anywhere. You know, and the man was able to do this through, you know, just basic things. Like it says, what created Singapore even he says that it wasn't rocket science. It was just looking at what has worked elsewhere and then bringing it back home. And I can cite examples, you know, and then he had a first-class team of highly qualified people who read a lot, found out what was working, and then brought it home and domesticated it.
It's all encompassing. He wrote virtually everything, those 31 years of experience
Kunle,
in building that country.
Yes, you know, he documented everything, and I think our leaders should be doing that. But what struck me was two things, actually, because the book is about 700 pages, you know, so you can read it and be lost in the detail. But I think if you look back, now that we're in a transition, it will be important to share what this man did. And it was very simple. One was what he called first principles, you know, which in consulting we call best practice. This man said he always looked for what worked elsewhere. For instance, when he was, Singapore is a very green city, a very beautiful city. You know, I was there in 2014. So that's the first thing that strikes you. The vegetation is lush and all that. But guess what? Before they did that, he invited two experts, an Australian and somebody from New Zealand, a plant expert and a soil expert, to study the soil of Singapore. And they did that, and they were able to advise him on what we thrive, what we flourish. And you know, he said they got about 8,000, you know, variety of plants that they kept testing, and only about 2,000 worked. So when you go into Singapore, so they already knew. And even in appointments he was making, he will make sure, he will research the person, he will look at the person's track record. When he was appointing the Chief Justice of the country, there was a guy he was in Cambridge with. I remember that he once borrowed the man's notes. I remember how meticulous it was, how comprehensive it was, and how successful the man had become. And when he appointed the man completely transformed, you know, the Singaporean judicial system.
What did he have to say about Nigeria in the book?
It's interesting, you know, probably the only time he visited Nigeria was 3 days before the coup. It was in Federal Palace Hotel.
The 1966 coup.
Exactly, sorry, 1966 coup, yes.
The January coup.
The January coup. He came, I think he came January 11th, and he was sitting beside a minister. You know, I don't want to mention his name, he's late now. And the minister told him that he was going to retire soon, and that he has already imposed a tax on imported shoes. So he's going to set up a local shoe factory. So that tax will make imported shoes very expensive, just basically creating a local market, you know, a local monopoly for him. And Lee Kuan Yew felt that, you know, why would you want to do something like that? Why don't you, you know, create something that would just be as good as any shoe from anywhere, you know? And then he also went to Ghana, where the person, then it was Sagefo Nkrumah, who was president. He introduced a young man who he said was the most, you know, a very brilliant guy, 30 years old, and a chancellor of one of your universities. And he was saying that, oh, what did this man study? He said, oh, he read classics. So Lee Kuan Yew felt, oh, why will your best people be reading about languages when you have this agricultural potential and all that? You know, at that point, he said he just gave up on Africa.
Incredible. Now, let me read a review on the book. For more than 3 decades, Lee Kuan Yew has been praised and vilified in equal measure, and he has established himself as a force impossible to ignore in Asian and international politics. From third world to first, offers readers a compelling glimpse into this visionary's heart, soul, and mind. So he poured his heart, soul, and mind into that book.
Yeah.
How much do Nigerian leaders do that? Have you seen enough of books, you know, documenting the stories and the legacies, you know, and the experiences of our past presidents, for example? Do we have enough of those out there?
I think we have a few. You know, Shagari has a book. General Obasanjo, Chief Obasanjo, you know, he writes from time to time.
Oh, he's a prolific writer.
Yes, you know, though some of them, you know, border on, you know, controversy. But that's the thing about third world to first. No controversial, well documented, you know, and according to him, he was trying to leave a blueprint together that Singaporean, the younger generation, so that they won't take for granted what they did. This man and his team, the team he put together, worked hard and, to create the society they have today. So, to answer your question, I think our leaders, need to be writing. It doesn't have to be a book. You can just write what they call memoir.
The political memoir.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've held an office, you've been CBN governor, you've been director general, you've been a president, you've been a senator. You should write a memoir.
We need a whole lot of those
Absolutely.
kind of books. We do. Now, we've got a president-elect now. If we were to ask you, Martins, you've read this book twice. What is the most important thing you want to advise me to execute once I get into office? What would it be, from third world to first world?
Meritocracy. And that's what Kuan Yew kept preaching. Get the best people. He always said the best man for the job wherever he is. Once you put that competent team together and you keep renewing. And one thing Lee Kuan Yew also did was that he always had a sense of, he was in office for 31 years, he always had a sense of which was the most critical sector or deliverable, and then he always had a way of putting the best people in those positions. So he was, even in the cabinet reshuffle, he was always putting, his best ministers in the most critical ministries at every point in time. So meritocracy is one thing I will advise the president-elect.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, we don't have so much time. We are going to bring you back to discuss your book. Your book is making waves out there. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Kule.
How to read more.
Yes.
We're going to talk about it. I want to talk about how you've taken marketing of books to a whole new level.
Absolutely.
In Nigeria. That will be fun to talk about.
I'm looking forward to it.
Nice to have you on the Channels Book Club.
Thank you.
Thank you.